Thanks for joining us, man. Appreciate it.
I can't thank you enough for having me on. It was great to be back in the Bay. I'm still in the hotel trying to recount all the people I met and I hadn't seen in a long time. Special group, actually having a coffee now with Chris Byrne, my close friend, who was my presenter. And just incredible to think that I'm part of this Hall of Fame, which is really for the athletes, not necessarily for folks like me, but add to my family legacy, and I'm happy for my family.
Yeah,
I'm very humbled and cherish the event.
Yeah, my partner, Darryl the Guru Johnson, was there, and he said it was a great event, and everybody had a good time. So congratulations, from here. Let me ask you this. In 2015, this town was electric. It was all Giants all the time. The ballpark was a scene. The fans knew when the team played. They knew who pitched. How did you consciously try to incorporate the fans in what you were doing as an organization?
Well, I think what was fortuitous, and it was the vision of Peter McGowan and the ownership group that saved the franchise from moving to Tampa, was the new stadium. It became, a destination, a landmark. We were very fortunate my first year to go from worst to first and win the division. And that was even before the referendum, the vote, and then eventually with Willie Brown's vision was able to get the stadium. So, first we built the team that was going to be, I think, the foundation of what was to come. And I have very fond memories of those early teams. Our first 8 years under Dusty, we finished first or second, or Dusty and Felipe, in the division. So I think it went hand in hand with turning the franchise around, as well as the new ballpark, and the fans came out in droves. And you remember all the sellouts.
Brian, I hope I don't scare you. As my partner had mentioned, I was in there last night and I was watching you, and I just want to congratulate you. There was command of the room. I don't even know if people were flocking to you. And I was telling my partner, man, we missed that guy. I'd just like to ask you, with what you built here and the legacy that you are a part of, a couple months back, there was some talk about, San Francisco playing for the Giants is not a destination. And a lot of people were throwing rocks at the city, and a lot of fans were upset at that. If you don't mind me asking, when you heard that, what went through your mind? Because that wasn't the case when you were here.
Well, it pains me more so because I spent 30 years here. And I go back to 2000 when we opened the ballpark. I actually had an apartment that whole time until I left the organization at 88 King Street, right across the street, where a lot of players and eventually Felipe and Bochy lived. And, we really brought up our families and our children in the city. They get to experience the greatness of Northern California and the city of itself. I always said that I thought San Francisco was a combination of, and I don't know why I think this, of Boston and Chicago. Very vibrant, walkable, different cultures, different neighborhoods, different climates, very unique place. So I cherish the time here, and this is where we made our bones, and the rest is history.
Brian Sabean joining us on 95.7 The Game, former general manager and vice president of baseball operations for the Giants, and he's the newest member of the Bay Area Sports Hall of Fame. Kind of where the Giants are right now. Since this team made the playoffs in 2016, they've only gone to the postseason once. Is that simply the price of a dynasty?
Well, as we know, there are ebbs and flows in sports, and as organizations go. It's tough, one, to stay at the top of the heap, let alone competitive and irrelevant. And people forget that after our 8-year run, which was 7 through 2003, we kind of went into a flat line situation until we produced our own players and got back in the saddle with a good 09 season and finished a couple games out of the wild card. And then 10 was the first stepping stone of the 3 and 5. So it's not easy in sports today because it's so competitive. It's not easy in baseball because I believe every year it's a shotgun start. And, our secret sauce became signing and developing our own players, and that was really the core of those teams.
Brian, I got to be honest with you here. I talked to a lot of diehard Giant fans, and we know a lot of these athletes, what make them go is ego. And I think that happens also with executives. So the Giants can have a new regime. They decide, Bruce Bochy, they part ways. And he goes and wins another World Series with another team after winning 3 for his old team. For a diehard Giant fan, Brian, that says, you know what, that's a bad look. Can you understand that?
Well, I can, but I just go with our tenure or my experience. I don't know another sports organization that was so lucky or fortuitous to have people like Dusty, Felipe, and Bochy and managers, all guys that were a cut above. I mean, different personalities, different ways of approaching the game. So, especially with Bochy, the 3 and 5, tough act to follow. It's like following, Sabean or Bear Bryant, and that's not an enviable task. I was a little bit surprised as a friend that he was willing to get back in the saddle because he was loving life in Nashville, and I think his wife, Kim, enjoyed having him home. But, as it turned out, Texas, their owner and GM came for a visit, and by the time they were ready to leave the house or get out of town, they had signed him to a 3-year contract, which, tickles my, heart because we need people like this still in the game. Dusty, because of his run in Houston, thank God, is a Hall of Famer, and he deserves to be, without the Houston part of his career on the resume. And, the other amazing thing, if you think about who I mentioned, starting with the managers, you got Dusty as a Hall of Famer. Felipe is a Hall of Fame person, let alone if there was a special category for a player and a manager, he'd certainly been it. Bochy is a Hall of Famer. Mm-hmm. Barry Bonds is going to be a Hall of Famer. Posey is going to be a Hall of Famer. So we led a charmed life, and we really raised the bar. That unfortunately, is a tough act to follow.
Yeah, Brian Sabean joining us on 95.7 The Game, former vice president of baseball ops for the Giants, and he's the newest member of the Bay Area Sports Hall of Fame. Brian, you were the longest tenured GM in Giants history. You were there about 2 decades. And did you ever, during that 2 decades, I know you probably had a philosophy, but did you ever pivot in another direction during that time and say maybe there's another way to go about this?
Well, the first pivot, unfortunately, for me personally, was having to trade Matt Williams. And the storyline behind that is Matt and Barry were making half our payroll going into the 97 season, and we had to sit down with ownership and we explained, Ned Coletti and I, that we couldn't operate in this fashion if we wanted to get out of the second division. We had to spread the wealth with the payroll, and unfortunately for Matt, and we know his career in San Francisco and how much he's been loved, became the casualty of having to trade him to Cleveland. But that was the first stepping stone to what became, kind of the building block that we needed. And, I look back and I think all of us kind of regret the missteps, or what keeps you up at night is like the 2002 Game 7 of the, Angel World Series.
Right.
The 13 team that, we thought was in decent shape after winning the 12, that flatlined. And, these jobs are collaborative more than it's a one-man band. That's what I cherish the most. We had so much connectivity between ownership through Larry Barrett to baseball ops my office, the manager, whoever that was, the coaching staff. And believe it or not, there really wasn't any infighting or finger pointing here through the good, the bad, the ugly, and obviously the greatness.
Brian, as a Bay Area sports fan, we're spoiled. We got the Warriors, obviously the 49ers. And I'm just curious, do you still see the Bay as San Francisco as a baseball town? And if not, how do you get back to being that?
Well, first and foremost, I said this last night. Before I got here, that this was a sports town, and now it's kind of on steroids because of the history of the teams and their dynasties they're in. And correct me if I'm wrong. First, it was the A's 3 in a row, then the Oakland Raiders, then you had the 49er run, and you had the Warriors kind of concurrent with our situation. I always said that I don't know that anybody in the country really understood or appreciated Bay Area sports, not only for the great teams and franchises, but the amazing athletes, because the damn sport and most sports are East Coast centric. So I got to experience it firsthand, and Lord knows when I took over, we weren't very relevant. We had to change that. And as Ned Coletti, also one of my presenters, mentioned last night, that I think that 97 team cemented that, we really were going to make a conscientious effort to keep up with the Joneses, the other sports teams in the Bay.
Let me ask you this, Brian, and then we'll let you go. I know probably got a lot going on today. You mentioned the Matt Williams trade, and I'm always curious. You knew that trade was going to be a tough one. How much did you either talk about or factor in before the trade, if at all, what the fans' reaction was going to be?
Well, we had no choice. I think, there was going to be no soft landing. And then, frankly, it was a bear personally. I'm talking about death threats at home, death threats from, the office phone, which, I came from the Yankee organization. I'm an East Coaster, a New England, person as I grew up. So I'm used to the noise, but I look back. I don't know anybody could have anticipated the fallout, but unfortunately, we were stuck in the mud, and if we didn't do something bold, we might have still been stuck in the mud.
Interesting. Hey, thanks so much for joining you. I still remember you referencing the lunatic fringe. Remember that?
Well, what's interesting, I don't know if there was a free agent at hand, and I might be screwing up the story. It might have been Guerrero.
It was. It was Vladimir
Montreal.
Guerrero.
And as you know, Felipe managed Guerrero. Well, we had information through Felipe and people in the game that Guerrero wasn't coming to San Francisco. And it was kind of coming out of left field that, he was going to be the next big free agent. We knew that wasn't, true internally. And it was really a side conversation, I thought, that I was having with Henry Schulman that became part of his story that he wrote. And I made that comment more so because, when you're living it on the inside and what's real versus imagined, and the people on the outside really don't have a glimpse of that or aren't included in, the decision making, some storylines or kind of way of the world develops on the outside looking in that, might not be as relevant to the situation, or certainly wasn't going to happen. Not necessarily a poor choice of words. I've used that term in the past, but I really thought that, I guess the desire, the comment about Guerrero perhaps coming to San Francisco was, from people that really didn't understand the dynamics of what was going on with the franchise at that time.
Gotcha.
Wow.
Hey, Brian, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Congratulations on last night. And I think I can speak for a lot of Giants fans when I say we miss you out here.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Bill. Well, I missed the Bay. It's good getting back. And hopefully I'll be back for the 2014 reunion in August.
Great. Thank you, Brian.
All right, guys. Thanks.
All right. That's Brian Sabean, former general manager and vice president of baseball ops for the San Francisco Giants.
So he's still working right now.
Yeah.